There are two types of people who will be watching this video. The first type are those that want to pull Kafka in future and are thinking, what characters do they need to build right now to support her in future? And of course, the second group of people are those that maybe have a spare Sampo lying around their account and really not too sure what to do with him at this point of time. We will be covering both of these in this video, but I will be touching more on the former first because I don't think there are many very interested in building Sampo for no valid reason. And I think the most pressing need, and I'm going to talk about it first, is Sampo is in the shop right now in June 2023. Once the shop resets in July, we might not be able to encounter him again. So some of you are actually maybe sitting on the fence. Do you want to pull Sampo from the shop if you don't have him? And if you do, what are the risks associated with it? I think one of the biggest risks is, what if he's on the Kafka banner and you technically wasted 7 pulls for him on this banner. But I think we're going to be talking about how useful he is for Kafka in a little bit. The overall verdict in terms of whether you should pick him up from the shop is, if you don't have him, I think it's a nice idea to at least have one of him. It's 7 pulls is quite worth it, especially considering that some of you know that some of you maybe were trying to go for Tingyun on Tingyuan's banner, and it was really very difficult. Maybe you got so many other characters and you don't even get one copy of a particular 4-star. That is something to consider. 7 pulls to guarantee a character might be a worthwhile consideration. And not only that, also his Eidolons are pretty good. Let's take a look. So his Eidolons work very well all the way to E6. E1 probably will be the most relevant if we do get one copy of him if he appears on Kafka's banner. When he uses a skill, it just deals one more instance of damage, which means a chance of proccing wind shears also increase slightly more, and his wind shear stacks, so more damage, more stacks means overall benefiting for his kit. E2 also increases the amount of stacking to all the enemies if he defeats them, although defeating an enemy is a little bit trickier to execute. Of course, E4, E5 are all, or E6 are all really solid as well. When skills have 5 or more stacks, immediately proc 8% wind shear damage, which is very nice because if you overcap on the amount of stacks that it has, at least there's still some benefit from it. And E6, you increase the multiplier by 15%, and based on the stacking, it's actually quite a lot of damage increase for his E6 as well. So he's a character that scales very well all the way to E6. If you are thinking about picking up from the shop, I do think it's better to have one in the pocket and spare just in case you need it, rather than, for example, taking the risk going in. But then again, everyone is a risk taker and you all have your own different levels of risk tolerance. So it's up to you to decide. That's my thoughts at least. And now let's go ahead and talk about what makes Sampo good for Kafka. I think the one thing that everyone needs to know, first and foremost, is that his ultimate ability increases DOT damage. So a lot of people are thinking he's probably going to be a pretty good pair, especially if you're running a DOT comp. Right now in the game, there are no other characters currently in our roster that increases damage over time. And for those of you who maybe aren't in tune with Kafka's kit, I've done a lot of guides on the channel already. You can check it out if you're interested in more of those details. But basically, long story short, Kafka, it can play into both a damage over time team, or maybe she can also be building as a crit, a normal DPS kind of style, depending on what suits your fancy. And a lot of it has been already talked about in crit and speed Kafka in other videos. But I think what I want to focus on, maybe talking about Sampo and moving forward as well a little bit more, is something not really touched on, is the DOT aspect. Sampo is going to be the best in slot buffer for DOT teams because he buffs DOT damage. Kafka also increases DOT damage, does a lot of shock DOT herself. Very nice synergy. But not only that, if you look at, for example, his skill ability here, this Ricochet Love, what this is like a bouncing of skills from multiple targets. If there's only one target, it only bounce on that particular character. They synergize very well with each other because if you think about the playstyle, Kafka also can play both in AoE as well as single target with her follow-up ability. Sampo also doesn't really care too much whether it's an AoE target or single target because he stacks a lot of wind shear, and this Ricochet Love can just bounce 5 times on a single target. So it's super strong as well. In terms of playstyle, they both suit each other very well. But I think the most important thing that some people might be missing out is a lot of them, Kafka as well as Sampo, have a lot of survivability built into their tracers. For Sampo here is definitely something like this spice up ability. When enemies are afflicted by wind shear, they all deal 15% less damage to Sampo. On surface value, 15% damage doesn't seem too much of a big deal, but if you think about a team composition, let's say you have 4 members and Kafka is relatively tanky, Sampo is relatively tanky, what this means is you could even choose to forego a shielder type class and maybe bring on a one healer and like maybe a double nihility like Sampo Kafka, and maybe one more DPS that has a bit of sustain in their kit. For example, maybe like Hook, who has like a bit of survivability in her kit as well. So it opens the door for flexibility, and also since she has a bit of burn in her kit, DOT as well. So it opens the door a lot in terms of your team composition, especially when your DPS characters and nihility DPS characters have already a bit of sustain in their kit. For those of you who don't know, Kafka has a bit of like HP in her kit as well, a bit of a chunkiness to add on to her survivability too, so it's really strong as well. But one other thing that is not really talked about is you can actually use March 7 together with a tank Sampo build. Why is that the case? Because Sampo generally has quite a high energy requirement here, 120 energy cost. This means that he also wants to build an effect hit rate so he is able to land his target. He also wants to build into attack so he gets that stack in terms of that wind shear damage. By mixing him together with March can put on the shield for Sampo to get a very thick chunky shield for him. He has that damage reduction from his trace here when enemies are inflicted by wind shear, which means that he becomes like a pseudo tank in himself. You can build a bit more like chunkiness, HP if you wanted to on him, but he has that thick shield for March 7 which lasts us also a little bit longer because of his chunkiness. And other than that, when your enemies hit him, he gets a lot of energy recharge, energy refund to get up to this energy cost burst much quicker, allowing him to proc this buff to the whole team where the enemies are all inflicted by this damage over time taken increase as well. So I think it's very versatile character, pretty solid, very flexible team comp. Right now, he's definitely going to feel very lackluster. So for the second group of people thinking like, what do you want to do with him right now? The meta is slowly shifting towards introducing DOT to the game. Effect resistance has been lowered for enemies above level 50, so definitely a good character now than he was like in 1.0. But still, I don't think he's very fantastic right now. We definitely need to have Kafka come into the board, and then we will see him start to shine quite a bit more. And any of you, maybe you skip Silver Wolf, you're skipping Lota because you really like Kafka, you could think about building this character right now. Gear him up, get your gear quick. You can also put it, for example, Fermata, which you can get for free. If you level this up, you can just shift it to Kafka later on since it's shock or wind shear as well. So those things are some stuff to consider. And as for Sampo now, maybe you have him on your bench, what to do with him? I told you that I'll have something in this video for everyone. If you look at the Memory of Chaos first buff from the 12th of June all the way to the 26th, the first rotation, when the enemies are inflicted by debuffs, they actually have a damage reduced by 4%. It stacks up to 5 times, so total 20%. Plus Sampo himself also has a 15% if enemies are inflicted by wind shear, as we talked about. This makes a tank Sampo build together with like March 7, where you can redirect the aggro to Sampo. Quite interesting to test out and try out in 1.1 as well. I'll be definitely doing it and showcasing it in more videos. And if you guys are interested in that unorthodox team comp, do stay tuned, like and subscribe for more of such future videos. Meanwhile, I've already done more Kafka content like this Kafka teams video here, or maybe a showcase as well that you might be interested to look into. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.